basically imported and invented racism in Canada.
I love that these guys are the intellectual giants of the right, by the way. Anyway, let's watch the Jordan Peterson Pierre Pepe video now. I really want to watch that. There's like certain parts of it that I saw that were really bad. Does anyone have a link for that? Because now we have to understand what the opposition looks like and what the future of Canada most likely looks like, since that NDP is probably not going to win. Jordan Peterson bravely, for the Daily Wire, interviewed Canada's next Prime Minister, Pierre Poilievre, 4 days ago. Lo and behold, up yours, woke moralists.
Business investment of the United States divided by the total number of workers in America is 28 grand. In Canada, it's 15 grand. The Canadian worker gets about 55 cents for every dollar of his American, and they're both measured in USD. In Vancouver, more money goes to bureaucrats than goes to the carpenters, electricians, and plumbers who build the place. And to add insult to injury, tradespeople who build homes can't afford to live in them. Why is it that we're still importing oil when we've got the world's third biggest supply? Why is it we can't export our natural gas?
I think that was perhaps the single stupidest thing I ever heard a politician say. Your federal government spent $6,000 of your family's money going over their budget.
They've squeezed the taxpayer out of every last dime, and they're still $62 billion short.
It's worse than that, because I suspect that the true picture is a lot more dismal than we know. Okay, so that's going to be dumped on you sometime in the next year.
They get the party, I get the hangover.
Anytime a conservative talks about balancing the budget, please do not read that as anything but him saying he's going to do austerity. After all, in the same exact conversation, he's talking about how Trudeau increased taxes. Do you understand? How do you, quote unquote, balance the budget while also criticizing tax hikes by cutting social safety nets? He's talking about screwing over the working poor further than even the Liberal administration has.
Over
8 years from now, what does it look like? Hello, everybody. I had the opportunity and the privilege today to speak with Mr. Pierre Poilievre, who is the leader of Canada's Federal Conservative Party, but also, barring catastrophe and God willing, Canada's next Prime Minister. A transition in power in this country is likely to take place sometime between March and October or November of 2025. And it appears very probable that Pierre Poilievre is the heir presumptive and will be the next Prime Minister of Canada. And so I talked to Mr. Poilievre 2.5 years ago, which was quite shocking to me. I thought it had been more recently than that. And a lot has transpired in the meantime. What did I talk about with Pierre? Well, I think mostly what I did was give Canadians and people on the international side a chance to see who this man is. In an hour and a half of discussion and the extra half an hour on the Daily Wire side, you have enough time to get a sense of how someone responds spontaneously and emotionally and cognitively to complex and challenging questions in a manner that's not rehearsed. That's the huge advantage of the podcast format. We talked about all the stories that Mr. Poilievre has heard in his thousands of event interactions with Canadians in industrial settings, in manufacturing settings, in academic settings, so that he could inform himself about the true situation that's facing Canadians struggling to make ends meet, despite their best efforts now, which is a dismal reality in Canada with its excessive housing prices and diminishing economy. Most importantly, perhaps, what is his vision of the future that...
Yeah, I've only seen parts of this interview, and let me tell you exactly what's going to happen. They're going to talk about culture war nonsense from the perspective of like a right-wing YouTuber. Okay? As though this guy's literally like an anti-woke Marvel fan or something. They're even going to... I know the fact that they bring up freedom of speech in Canada, which I think is really funny because it doesn't exist, but that's like hilarious. That's how Americanized they are, that they forget that like they're not running for office in America. They will then have at least a couple moments where Jordan Peterson has the funniest ad break segue. I suspect that will also happen. Yeah, wokeism. Pierre Poilievre says Canadians are too obsessed with race because of wokeism and agrees with Jordan Peterson that Canada essentially had to invent and import racism because it didn't exist here before recent decades. Amazing.
both threatens and provides opportunity for Canadians. How is it possible for the citizens of this great country to dig themselves out of the malaise and pit that has been dug for them and by them over the last 9 years? And what could be done to remove the impediments such that this country could become the dynamic industrial powerhouse that it certainly could easily become? So join us for all that. So, sir, it's been almost 2.5 years since we sat down to talk the time before. So I guess the first thing I'd like to know is, what have you been doing during that time? I'd like to hear about your day-to-day schedule and your week-to-week schedule. Like, lay out your job.
Basically, we have two parts to my professional life. It's very bifurcated. There's the Parliament Hill side, which is early morning meeting with my leadership team, House Leader, Deputy Leader, Whip, etc., to plan out the day, the battle plan for our parliamentary committees, question period, etc. That is punctuated by one weekly caucus meeting and just the daily prosecution of the government, which is the quintessential role of an opposition leader. And then the other part to my life is touring. I asked my assistant today how many events we had done over the last year, and he said it was exactly 600. I mean, a few weeks ago it was 507.
So that means this guy, instead of doing any sort of governance, has been running for office for at least the past 2 years. This dude has been running for office. He's been doing campaign rallies, or for the last year, twice a day. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm no big city lawyer, and certainly not a big city lawyer in Canada. But I'm pretty sure Canadian laws have some written in the books against that sort of thing. Are you allowed to rally, to do political rallies in Canada this far ahead of an election? I thought that there was, in countries like Canada that are a little bit more responsible, not one bit. No. I thought that in countries like Canada, there are limitations to when, how, and where you can rally. Like, there's a time frame, usually in European countries at least, where you can actually run for office. Oh, there's no, wait, what is this? No, there are specific rules that you can rally, like signs on the lawn, specific time before election. It's kind of a gray area. They can't put up signs and stuff, but I'm guessing they can say this isn't a rally for office.
70 something. So we've done 600 events, and those are like tours at mills, mines, factories, farms, high-tech facilities. And we tour in, see how the place operates. Then I give a short speech, do a question and answer, and then I just mull about and shake hands with the workers for 25 minutes to an hour, and then I go on to the next stop and do it all over again. And we did that in 9 provinces and 2 territories this year. And so that's a summary of my workload and work plan to do my job.
And you said 600 events. You made allusion when we were driving over here that the weekends are particularly packed, that you'll do like 10 events on Saturday or Sunday.
Right.
And so what a typical event, what do you enjoy about the events? Why are they useful? And what do you learn?
Well, first of all, you get a practical insight into how the country actually works. Mm-hmm. Like who makes the widgets? How do those get made? How do...
Yeah, okay. Immediately, once you start talking about widgets, like when you use the term widget, automatically you're a freaking econ nerd, okay? You didn't actually ever have a job. And from what I understand, what Chatters was saying, he literally never did have a job. He just, at the age of 32, went into office. Immediately, that's an econ Andy, okay? Nobody who has actually worked a real job is like, oh, you find the widgets. He's been at MP since 26? Since 26? Oh my God.
How does our supply chain come together? What skill sets do these incredible workers have? What background qualified them to be a licensed welder, or to run a CNC machine, or to be the CEO of a 300-person company that supplies parts into the American economy. And that practical insight, I think, is important if you want to lead a government and a national economy. So you learn a lot. Then I get to hear the stories of the people who work in these places and get their feedback on what they want, what their dreams and aspirations are.
Yeah, I want to turn to that in some detail. Let me ask you about the parliamentary side too, because I think it'd be useful for people to know how you prepare for what you do in Parliament, it isn't obvious to me that people exactly understand the business of being in opposition, at a really practical level.
Right.
What do you see as your major function? I know you're there to push back against the government and to question and criticize, but it isn't obvious how you go about preparing for that, or how you decide what issues you're going to focus on and how you distribute the response.
Okay, I don't care about this. All right, let's get to the good stuff.
Okay, so there's a lot of distrust, generally speaking, in relationship to, I would say, establishment organizations and political elites all across the West.
Yeah, but this guy's very different. He's not a political elite. He's a guy who touched the widgets at the widget factory.
A lot of that well-earned. Why should Canadians believe that the vision that you just laid out is something that you hold personally dear and not merely what would you say, a set of carefully calculated...
Some people say this guy's an economist, but he wanted to put Canada entirely on crypto back in 2022. In a pitch to crypto... No, you don't understand. That was Pierre with the glasses on. This is a different Pierre. You don't understand. That's the old him, bro. That's when he was at the widget factory. In a pitch to cryptocurrency investors, Polar Bear says he wants Canada to be the blockchain capital of the world. You actually aren't wrong. He just looks like a different person. I mean, he still looks like a dweeb now, but he at least looks less of a dweeb.
And it will be hard because the temptation will be, this is the mistake that conservative parties around the world have made countless times. They think, well, anybody who's got a conservative mindset is already voting for me, so I can go off and chase the ideas of my political opponents, and then everyone will love me because I'll have the conservatives due to the fact that I have the name conservative, and then I'll have all these other people because I've embraced their contrary direction. And in the short term, it works because you manage to have all of these people under, and all of the different political ideologies captured in one tent. But the problem happens when the policies are a disaster. And then people wake up and go, oh my God, my taxes are now up, the inflation is out of control, the deficit is spiraling, there's crime on the streets. So does the temptation exist to try and take on the political policies of the socialists in the short term? Sure, but it's one that I will fiercely resist because I know that by the 4th year of my mandate, people would be enraged because their lives would be even worse. So
yeah, you don't care about that. You're a conservative, so that's obviously what you're gonna do. Anyway, look, as far as I understand, in the most reductive ways possible, aside from the usual things that liberals do, which is not address the actual harm that people are experiencing, even though you ran on a relatively aggressive, like anti-wealthy tax the corporations campaign, you kind of cut that aside. There are some minor improvements, or at least like some semblance of like rational governance there. If you talk about climate change, you do carbon taxes, which of course these assholes are going to get really mad about, and talk about how Canada should be the leader of oil and gas exports around the planet, blah blah blah. But at the end of the day, it's always too little and too late from the liberal side. And the grievances that mounted against Justin Trudeau came from his goofy nature, his overall incompetence, and almost identical problems that were faced, that the Canadian society was facing, that Justin Trudeau basically operated in the almost identical way that the Democratic Party operates, including but not limited to, I think his like signature achievements are funding Ukraine, I guess, like funding Ukrainian funding, doing NATO, but this time not in a Joe Brandon kind of way, but in a Justin Trudeau style way, and also legalizing weed, $10 a day daycare. But basically everybody hates immigrants. Think that like he brought in more migrants, ruined the housing market by bringing in immigrants, and also caused inflation, even though America was the #1 at dealing with inflation amongst the OECD nations, and then Canada was #2 at dealing with inflation amongst other OECD nations. It doesn't really matter. People were understandably very upset. So yeah, it's almost identical to America in many ways, it feels like. What? Are you going to cover how your crazy nation is leaking and Musk is now getting his teeth into the UK? Yes, I will. It's really messed up.
dangers and they want safety again. And then you have business owners that are saying there's just no way to continue to compete in Canada. We have to look at moving. And that means the next 200 jobs we create is going to be in Ohio or Florida or some other place than Canada. That's the kind of overview that I get.
Except we have healthcare and abortion is legal for now. Yeah, you have healthcare for now as well. Canadian healthcare should be seen as living on borrowed time. Okay? Just the way I see it, from where I'm standing, from what the provinces have done so far, Canadian healthcare is also living on borrowed time. I think Canadian healthcare goes away before the NHS is the NHS falls apart. Didn't you say the same thing about the UK after Boris won? Wait, I did. Please tell me how I was wrong. Did you bring that up as a own? I mean, we're living in it. What are you talking about? You can't say that. You can't say that as like, dude, you were so wrong about Boris Johnson when you're living in the world that you can't undermine my predictions by pointing to how correct I was. You said after Boris got elected, UK would privatize healthcare. I did say that. I said UK would move towards privatizing healthcare by crippling and undermining the existing aspects of the NHS, and that Boris Johnson, despite the fact that despite the fact that he ran on funding healthcare, would not end up doing so. I was right. Unless you think I meant that Boris Johnson was going to completely undermine, like, no more NHS. Like, Boris Johnson was going to nuke the NHS. I don't think so. It's virtually impossible to dismantle universal healthcare program in Canada. The popularity of it, despite the underfunding, is too high. Canadians want healthcare reform, but they do not want to get rid of public healthcare. At most, they are okay with clinics that provide specialized services outside the public realm. That's how it starts. Obviously, that's bad, but it's nowhere near borrowed time. No, that's how it starts. That's literally how it starts. That's how it works. You go for specialized care, then it's like general practitioners. We just simply don't have enough of them. Sorry. No funding to any of the areas of need so that private healthcare can be a competitive product. And inevitably, you get people used to it. You create there's already obviously a secondary market of insurance to begin with. But any country that has some semblance of social safety nets will always seek to undermine it. But you can't do it in one day. It's ridiculous. There's no way to ruin it in one day. You would never be able to. It's far too popular. Every politician understands, whether they are for or against social safety nets. Every population understands. Once you put in any sort of social safety nets, it takes decades to undermine it. Because once people take it, they take it for granted. They're like, what do you mean? This is my thing. You gave this to me. I'm not letting you have it back. That's why America has been so good at refusing to offer anything since the 80s. That's why it's much easier here to consistently advocate to cut taxes, because you're like, well, the government is not providing anything for me. Why am I giving money to it? Is the commonly held opinion in this country. Starving the beast. The devastating impact of Reaganomics. I think chatters are coping. My family doctor and all the family doctors are still paid the same amount per patient visit now as they were 20 years ago. Tell me that's sustainable in any way. 20 years, no funding increases. We're definitely cooked. They're just going to wait till people get more desperate before they chop its head off. Yeah. That's how it works. That's how it works in general. You refuse to add additional funds to desperately to underfunded social safety nets that are in dire need of extra funds. And then you cut side deals by way of lobbyists to the private sector that want to create private healthcare. You first implement private healthcare as a last act, a last-ditch effort to save the crippling healthcare infrastructure. This is to save the existing social safety nets. This is to save the existing socialized medicine. You don't understand. These doctors, they're too overwhelmed. That's why we need these private healthcare facilities. And then you continue undermining and underfunding public healthcare. And more private facilities keep propping up until it's basically nothing. I know this from tracking the American public schooling system. Okay? I mean, also, we've just never really had like a fully flushed out socialized medicine structure in this country. I believe since like post World War II, we have always had healthcare tied to your employment. And initially it was so that companies could have a competitive advantage over one another. by offering additional quote unquote benefits. But we've never really had that. Sweden is a great example of what they did in terms of privatization initiatives in the schooling sector, which they went back on. I don't know if they have actually continued undermining it, but this is the most significant factor that this is the most significant damage that social democracies inevitably face, which is that as long as capital accumulation still exists, as long as there's an opportunity to farm out profits, private enterprise is always going to work throughout. Private enterprise is always going to work throughout time, across decades, if that's how long it takes to consistently undermine anything that the government is doing, advocate for austerity, cripple these programs beyond repair, and then come in as the private savers of said programs. Sometimes it happens, like in the Thatcher era. It happens way faster than you would expect with like public transit. If you look at public transit in the UK, a lot of these things, a lot of these like government funded projects were handed off to the private sector, and obviously the consumer suffered for it. Like people who use and rely on public transit suffered as a consequence of that. Here in Canada, the only ones that benefit from free healthcare are people on welfare and disability. What do you mean? You are 100% correct. They do that in Sweden a lot as well. They cut free dental recently from 23 to 19, for example. They also keep underfunding the healthcare system in general, and they say, look, it's not working. We need to privatize it. It's a classic move. I mean, yeah, this is another one. I worked on the privatization of England's water in 1989. It was an organized ripoff. Taxpayers lost out. Consumers have paid through the nose since. This failed regime is long past its sell-by date. Jonathan Portes is a professor of economics and public policy at King's College London and a former civil servant. This is about the privatization of England's water. They make it worse with privatization. They use privatization as the solution and make it even worse, but companies are making record sales. Yeah, but in that time frame, your GDP goes up, okay? Your gross domestic product goes up. I mean, let me tell you, one thing that the GDP loves, the number machine loves, is costly middle managers that don't actually do anything, but simply have to be hired and have to get paid, and also can add additional points of seeking out profit to the process. America is not the shining beacon of hope and prosperity at the end of the road. It is actually a glaringly obvious warning sign for many of these countries. And yet, for some weird reason, nobody seems to understand that. Even if they do make fun of our dumbasses and our brain rot and our conservative movement and say, wow, these guys are so crazy. Why are they like this? It doesn't make sense. They don't understand that, like, what's happening here is inevitably going to happen in your country. Even the pervasive influence of lobbying. Also, not dissimilar to the Democrats is this thing I saw, which I love. I saw that liberal sources had told Global News they felt Trudeau had pulled the party too far to the left, and they seem to think that it was the problem with his leadership. Are they going to put like Freeland in charge or something? Is that what's going to happen? Like they want like a... They're treating Justin Trudeau as though he's like a Corbyn head. What is this? Newsycombinator.com. What is this? The GDP joke? Two economists are walking in a forest. They come across a pile of shit. First economist says to the other, I'll pay you $100 to eat that pile of shit. The second economist takes the $100 and eats the pile of shit. They continue walking until they come across a second pile of shit. The second economist turns to the first. I say, I'll pay you $100 to eat that pile of shit. The first economist takes it. Walking a little more, the first economist looks at the second and says, you know, I gave you $100 to eat that shit. And then you gave back to me the same $100 to eat. I can't help but feel like we both just ate for nothing. That's not true, responded the second economist. We increased the GDP by $200. This is the nerdiest joke, but it's, yes. You absolutely butchered this joke. Oh my God. I mean, I just read it from a forum. What are you talking about? None of the above, 22%. Chrystia Freeland is 19%. Mark Carney at 14%. Melanie Jolly at 4%. Christy Clark at 4%. This is very bad news for the Liberal Party. Most of the people included are big political names and established records. That the winner is none of these losers is devastating for the Liberals. That's crazy that Chrystia Freeland is the most popular out of all of the recognizable names within Liberal leadership candidates. That is devastating for the country. Man, Carney is Trudeau's finance guru. I can't believe he's thinking about running. What is that? I don't know what this is. What is that a sign for? I don't know enough about Canadian politics. Symbol for Diagon, an extremist FR group. Diagon is a white supremacist group in Canada. That's PP at the Freedom Convoy. Nice. He wants to be an American. What's more American than an American-funded trucker convoy? Maybe we will annex Canada after all. I don't know. Maybe they're doing fifth column style infiltration. Maybe we're already there by way of Canada's very own Texas, Alberta. We've already assumed the reins of control. I'm going back to Uzbekistan, bro. Diagon wants to create their own country starting from Alberta and drawing a diagonal line to Texas. Wait, what? No prominent leaders was the biggest issue when the cons were in power before Trudeau was elected. Trudeau had name recognition and pretty good name recognition at that. But yeah, Canadians don't have better attention span than Americans when it comes to recognizing political names. It was really bleak when I was growing up under Harper. I will die on this hill. Quebec is Florida. Okay. No, I don't think so. It was started by a podcaster. That's not surprising. Canadian alt-right organization conceived by podcaster Jeremy Mackenzie. The U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Counterterrorism is called a far-right extremist group. It was mentioned in the news coverage in the Canada Convoy protest. It's a right-wing, alt-right extremist militia network of chapters throughout Canada. A House of Commons Canada report called it a violent extremist organization. According to Canadian Anti-Hate Network, a neo-fascist militia believes that a violent revolution is coming and is an accelerationist movement that believes a revolution is inevitable and necessary to collapse the current government system. Diagon associate Alex Vriand has promoted the neo-Nazi propaganda film Europa, The Last Battle in chat rooms. Barbara Perry, the director of Ontario Tech University's Center on Hate, Bias and Extremism, described Diagon's ambition to create a white ethno-nationalist state as irony poisoning to normalize hateful rhetoric through humor. The group's motto is gun or rope. What gun? Once again, I feel like Canadians also LARP as Americans. Like they think they live in America, dude. And it seems like they want to be a part of America. Like, what do you mean gun or rope, dog? What are you talking about? Maybe that's why they say or. Gun or rope. Mostly rope, because we can't really have guns because of the expansive gun control legislation that makes it virtually impossible for me to retain ownership over a firearm because I can't find 3 extra people that will put their name on this on this psych evaluation and be held legally liable down the line if I do use the gun. So just rope. Despite this, in 2024, Poilievre was seen as leaving an RV with a drawing of the Diagon flag visible on the door while being filmed attending a convoy-style protest in the Nova Scotia-New Brunswick border. He would endorse the protest as good old-fashioned Canadian tax revolt. Oh, this part was really funny, where he goes dollar for dollar. Here, we'll just look at this. This is like just some of the best parts, I guess.
And by the way, put aside race, this obsession with race that wokeism has reinserted.
Like, you can have an American accent, but the moment you say wokeism, I'm like, you're cucked. You want to be European. Okay? When you say wokeism, like, what are you, French? What do you mean wokeism? Just say Americans are too woke or something, like a normal person. Wokeism. You're not French, okay? What are you saying? Oh, wokeism, don't you know? Oh, le wokeisme.
Well, invented even.
Invented in many ways.
Yeah, that's right. Canadians invented, wokest Canadians invented racism. After all, the indigenous genocide that took place was actually not racist in origin at all, nor were the residential schools. That was actually good and wholesome and collaborative in nature. The First Nations wanted all of that. We wanted to do that.
When I moved to Toronto, it was as race blind as any country, as any city could be.
Right.
Right. And that's flipped. And it's flipped because of that obsessive concern.
Yeah. People people that say Toronto's filled to the brim with Indians, okay, they only recognize that Toronto was filled to the brim with Indians when they only started getting racist like that when wokeism came out. You know, when they say purge the Indians out of Canada, they actually are saying that because they want to be anti woke, or they want to be anti woke. Sorry.
With race, right? That was something we 100% did not need in Canada,
Yeah.
right? We basically, what would you say, imported and invented racism in Canada.
We imported and invented racism in Canada. Racism in Canada was invented when wokeism was invented. I love that these guys are the intellectual giants of the right, by the way. It's like, yeah, no, definitely, dude. It's not actually, it's not actually all of the white supremacist actions that previous leadership has taken. It's when you point to it. That's when it becomes racism. The real problem isn't racist violence or white supremacy. The real problem is pointing a finger at it and reminding people that it still very much exists.
Right.
Well,
As a consequence of policy.
Wokeism seeks to divide people into these different groups and subgroups, and we see the results in a 250% increase in hate crimes.
Dude, this is crazy. Yeah, it's the hate crimes are being committed. The hate crimes are being committed by not like his supporters, okay? It's actually being committed by the woke. The racists would have had no idea about the racial delineation if it weren't for the wokes who reminded them that, you know, sometimes migrants come from different countries. Before then, all the racists that, you know, say stuff like keep Tim Hortons white or whatever the right-wing neo-Nazis do in Canada. So stupid. God, racists are so dumb. But anyway, yeah, we gotta keep the Tim Hortons white, don't you know? You know, they didn't know to say that beforehand. Before that, they were saying keep the Tim Hortons Tim Horton, I guess. I don't know.
But we're going to get back to the basic principle that people are judged based on their individual character and humanity rather than by their group identity. And that is actually, ironically, the most unifying thing we can do to bring our country back together. And as Lincoln put it, to bind up the nation's wounds.
Wondering what conservatives would do to social programs if they return to power under Poilievre. He says all those socialist policies like public health care and the like are actually bad for the poor and redistribute towards the super wealthy, so they all need to be cut.
So the socialist policies that provide...
Yeah. I hate when the wealthy is just like taking advantage of... I hate when the... Sorry, I accidentally said the truth. I hate when the wealthy is taking advantage of, not taken advantage of. I hate when the wealthy is taking advantage of socialized medicine. It's disgusting.
Provide goods and services to Canadians, let's say, or denizens of other countries by printing money, actually punish the poor brutally.
Oh, absolutely.
In consequence of the inflation that they generate.
Yes. I mean, all the socialist policies in practice redistribute from the working class to the super wealthy in practice. Mm-hmm. And I can prove that.
Oh, you can prove that. Yeah. It's just odd. It's odd that these guys are so anti-capitalist in their critique of what? Socialism? I'm so mad, dude. The only people that are allowed to say anti-capitalist things, the only people that are allowed to engage in left-wing populist economics are right-wingers that want to literally continue the same system of oppression and redistributive cycle that absolutely does shaft the working poor at the behest of these super wealthy to create even higher rates of profit. It is so frustrating, dude. That's why, what is the age-old adage? You know, if you ask a socialist what is wrong with capitalism, they can describe it. If you ask a capitalist what is wrong with socialism, they just describe capitalism. It's just straight up. PP followers literally believe that Trudeau is a communist. Oh my God. Oh my God. They're just as stupid as we are. I thought that like your adjacency to European style politics and the fact that you have socialized medicine and the fact that, you know, many Canadians can speak more than one language led me to falsely believe that your right wing was at least a little bit smarter than the average American hog that say stuff like Nancy Pelosi is a goddamn communist. Turns out you're just saying Nancy Pelosi is a victim of le wokeism and socialist. That's what you're saying instead. Sign here to have a prime minister who doesn't admire basic communist dictatorships. How to do communism. Establish a new communist utopia. Rob or kill the successful. Force the rest to work for free. Run out of food. Starve to death. Say it wasn't real communism. Establish a new communist utopia. Also, this identifies correctly and implies that Karl Marx was a famous communist tyrant, like an authoritarian communist dictator. Bro couldn't even dictate a clean household. What are you saying? What was he dictating? What country was Karl Marx in charge of?
I've been tracking economic statistics in relation
Anyway,
that on again and again and again.
theory.
In practice,
Yeah.
In practice, they all the redistribution that happens in these so-called socialist countries ultimately goes from the working class to the super wealthy. That is the reality.
Yeah, unlike what's happening in Canada and America, which is that capitalism is the greatest redistributive structure. Is so funny to say when virtually everyone understands that we live under capitalism and that is precisely what is happening. What you are complaining about is currently happening right now. And you turn around and you go, you know why it's happening? Because of not enough capitalism. That's why it's happening. Yeah, the real solution to this capitalist problem is more capitalism. Great. Throughout the interview, you can see how Poilievre has deceptive but effective stories and cherry-pick stats that serve his agenda. He'll fabricate a narrative that the government spending is what's driving up home prices to distract from developer and speculator profiteering.
You know, I have a buddy whose family moved here from Italy back in 1973. His father worked paving roads, and his mother made sandwiches in a senior's home. They were able to pay off their home 10 minutes from Parliament Hill in 7 years.
Yeah, how will we get back to that? Or, sorry, what do you think is the reason why that doesn't happen? Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait to hear why he thinks that's no longer the case. It's because the buddy of mine is Italian, and now the ones that are coming in are Chinese and Indian, and they just don't have that work ethic or something, is what an incredibly racist person would say. But he'll probably say, because of woke, I guess. I don't know. What was he going to say? That the government spending has made it impossible?
Right.
Their grandchildren wouldn't be able to save up a down payment for that home in 50.
I hate the way that right-wingers correctly identify problems that they've contributed to and oversaw the facilitation of, only to turn around and say, you know what's actually the solution to these problems? More of the things that we did to cause the problems.
15 years, and they will be university educated with all the advantages of having been here 2 decades. That is the consequence of the money supply growing vastly quicker than the stuff that money buys. So what we have to do is stop growing the money supply and start growing the stuff money buys, right? Produce more energy, grow more food, build more homes. We have to unleash the free enterprise system.
Yeah, the free enterprise system is shackled. That's why the housing market is so bad. Yeah. Grow less money, grow more houses, don't you know? Yeah, what Canada needs is deregulation. It's funny to hear politicians suggest that housing should be dirt cheap because Canada has a lot of land and it's just government making it so expensive. There's a reason 90% of Canadians are living within 100 miles of the US border. Okay, I have a controversial opinion on this. I have a couple different opinions on this, okay? Number one, I think when people say a lot of parts of Canada are inhospitable, like you can't live there. And people say that about America too, where they're like, oh, it's mountainous or it's too cold. I do legitimately think that's I do legitimately think that that's cope. Okay. Having said that, however, I do understand the argument that people make in terms of preservation of the environment. Okay. I do understand that. Like, I feel like, motherfucker, you live in LA. Have you been to Calgary? Okay, calm down. I know it's cold. I know it is cold up there. Hold on. I know. I think that there are valid reasons as to why you don't build. There are valid reasons as to why you don't build on certain parts of the country. But I do think that maybe I sound too much of like a pseudo intellectual. Everybody stop yelling at me about LA. Okay, shut up. I can't live there. I know. I'm not saying I could live there. Listen, maybe I'm going to sound too much like a pseudo intellectual, but I always think of Chongqing. Okay? Like, if China is capable of building a city, carving it to the side of a mountain, I think every other country is capable of doing that as well. Like, whenever people say like, oh, it's too mountainous of a terrain to build, or this or that, I feel like it's just not as profitable. You know what I mean? Do you think that's the same thing as living in a tundra? Even then, we talk about how space isn't the issue. We already have declining populations in rural areas with food deserts and hospital vacuums. Why build on a mountain when we abandoned already rural areas? Yeah, that's the other issue, is that there's just not enough jobs and not enough commerce in these places. All right, I was with you, but now you sound stupid. Did you know Toronto has worse traffic than any other city outside of Europe? We generally have the worst public infrastructure in the world. I still think that like, no matter where. Oh my God, climate change is the reason why Trump wants to annex Canada. I just realized. He's like, look, 90% of it is just like viable land. Just you wait until temperatures rise a little bit further. And then the majority of Canada will be the only livable space. Canada's environment is similar to the Siberian region in the USSR, built out of it. Yeah, but also at the same time, look at the way it is look at the way it is now, though. So I guess that's still an argument to government funding. If there is no profit motive and you build by need, I'm sure that there's plenty of other places that you could build around, regardless of the treacherous conditions. But then again, there's also obviously good reasons as to why. There's also good reasons as to why they don't build on these places, whether it's like indigenous land or whether it's to preserve the environment. As a Canadian, it's not that cold. That's not really the problem. Cost of living gets insane in the north because nothing grows there, and it's almost impossible to put anything in the ground. I think my controversial opinion is that, okay, I'm going to say another controversial thing. People are going to get mad at me. Are you ready? People can live in Phoenix. They can live in the northernmost point of Canada. Bro, it gets to 125 degrees in Arizona, okay? Not the same. Unsubbed. A head of lettuce in Yukon is like $25. Yeah, because of logistics. Anyway, let's continue. I'm done with my bad takes. It's funny to hear a politician suggest that housing should be dirt cheap because Canada has a lot of land and it's just the government is making it so expensive.
Like, we should have the most affordable housing in the world.
I think what I just said about the Phoenix versus tundra argument is, once again, me being a leftist but too early. I think that with climate change, places like Phoenix are going to be virtually impossible to live in, and a lot of the colder climate will no longer be as cold, and will be way more of a livable experience. Y'all cry about the weather when it's like -5 Celsius. Stop it. No, dude, -5 Celsius. I cry about the weather when it's like 15 degrees Celsius. Are you kidding me? I live in LA. You sound like the tech bros. Why can't we just build dense cities and insert unlivable place? I know it's a stupid take. I know.
It should be dirt cheap because we have the most dirt. We just need to get the government out of the way. The same goes for our resource sector.
I think when he says that, he's talking about destroying existing forests, though.
I mean, why is it that we're still importing oil when we've got the world's third biggest supply? Why is it we can't export our natural gas overseas? But we've got so...
PP says Justin Trudeau's an authoritarian socialist that wants to control every aspect of Canadians' lives and all the industries in this country.
About to say is not a shock to anyone. We have a prime minister who is dedicated to a extremely radical ideology. It is just a rehashed socialism that has been discredited again and again and again throughout the ages. And his...
I think if you think that Justin Trudeau is in any way, shape, or form a socialist or a radical, you need to be institutionalized, okay? You need to immediately check in to the nearest institution to get some of that publicly funded mental health services. I don't even know if they have it in Canada. Do they do mental health? Can you get therapy in Canada? I feel like you probably can, right? It's difficult, but... No, you can't? Okay, well, you should expand with some of those radical socialist policies. That is the radical authoritarian socialist Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau is closer to being a black man than he is to being a radical socialist. At least he's attempted to be one and never attempted to be the other, okay? He's neither, but closer to one. That's crazy. You are out of your mind. He tried. 2 out of 10. Don't recommend. People legitimately believe he's Castro's son. Okay, do they also believe that like socialism is transmitted as a genetic disease or something? Like what? Even if he was, okay, and I like that conspiracy, but how does that work? You just... through genetic transmission. Socialism is hereditary, famously. Wait, why are you guys saying they literally do? Please stop. No, I think they just don't like him, so they're saying he's bad, like Fidel Castro was bad.
Basically, authoritarian socialism has guided him throughout his entire prime ministership. He believes in a state that controls every aspect of your life, your money, your speech, your thought. He controls the economic, all of the industries of the country. And every time that has been tried, it is a complete disaster. So there's no mystery.
Yeah, Justin Trudeau implemented his 10-year prosperity plan through the command economy. The People's Committees of Canada got together and decided what the 10-year agenda looked like for the People's Republic of Canada. Okay? It was crazy. They got together and they implemented the authoritarian socialism of carbon tax. The People's Republic of Canada. And what? $10 kindergarten? It's crazy. The other PRC, the People's Republic of Canada.
Involved, and it is the same old disastrous outcome that results from the same
$10 daycare, sorry.
Same old disastrous policies.
Right.
One thing I do find interesting that Poilievre has taken the lesson that many say center-left parties need to learn. Stop watering down their agendas, try to attract those who don't agree with them. He says it'll be shamelessly right-wing in government.
This is the mistake that conservative parties around the world have made countless times. They think, well, anybody who's got a conservative mindset is already voting for me, so I can go off and chase the ideas of my political opponents, and then everyone will love me because I'll have the conservatives due to the fact that I have the name conservative, and then I'll have all these other people because I've embraced their contrary direction. And in the short term, it works because you manage to have all of these people under, and all of the different political ideologies captured in one tent. But the problem...
He does sound like both Bill Maher and Anderson Cooper and also Jake Tapper. And that's because, and I've said this before, and I think it's my best Canadian politics take, Canadian conservatives want to be American, okay? That's why. He just sounds American. He doesn't have that Canadian dog in him, okay?
To put out a call to Canadians.
Poilievre says that once conservatives take power, His supporters must remain engaged to push not just federal lawmakers, but those in other levels of government to adopt his extreme right-wing agenda. Companies will also be expected to sell a deregulatory agenda.
That they have to stay politically active. They can't assume that simply by changing, by voting in an election, that everything is going to, all the problems are going to reverse instantaneously. Like, I will need people to put pressure on the Senate to adopt my economic reforms. I will need people to put pressure on their mayors and local councillors to get out of the way and let us build homes. I will need businesses to actually do their part. I mean, our corporate Canada is so...
I just don't know who's going to build the houses, like, and also how they're going to build the houses, and what are they going to do with the existing land where you could build more houses on? Like, who's... I just don't... Like, the real problem with housing seemingly is the same whether you are in Canada or whether you're in the United States of America or whether you're in London or anywhere else. People always point to random nonsense, but it is the unfortunate reality that housing is not seen as simply shelter, something that is a necessity for survival, but instead a speculative asset, a nest egg. No one, and I mean no one, is trying to even remotely undermine this. And even the Yimbys themselves also go along with this, where they're like, no, it's just, of course it's a speculative asset. Let's just use that to build more housing. If you treat housing like a speculative asset, one that also must be protected because it's also shelter and people need that, then you arrive at this issue where housing prices have to always go up, because that's how your nest egg goes up. That's how you generate more, that's how you increase your net worth. That's how the average person increases their net worth. I don't know, Hasan, maybe talk to and look at the Canadian chatters. Wait, what? Canada has a lot of Crown-owned land and removing restriction to protected land. Wait, what? Thank you. Listening to this idiot, I regret not abandoning Europe and moving to Canada if they truly implemented socialist stuff. I still don't know what this guy believes, only what he disagrees with. I can tell you what he believes. Conservatives will always tell you what they believe. They believe in all of the awful things that are happening right now, accelerated. What is this? Don't people like it when things are cheaper? Chinese President Xi Jinping reportedly asked his advisors, we're in a very strange world where Xi Jinping embraces deflation as the consequence of higher productivity technologies, while the West has spent 15 years pumping more money into the system precisely to prevent it, thereby creating a form of welfare for wealthy asset owners. The rapid growth of the second industrial revolution went hand in hand with a good form of deflation. When markets are functioning well and competition is very strong, deflation can happen. Chinese communists know this, but the European and US pro-market right seemingly don't. Yeah, I mean, the real people that hate deflation are people who are constantly seeking out more profit. People who are not necessarily wage laborers themselves, but capital owners. People who want to continue generating wealth off of the pre-existing capital that they have. If they have assets, then yes, of course they hate that.
Shipped to Canada and sort of left me open-mouthed in amazement at our dismal condition. So from what I've been able to understand...
Oh, I keep going back to the wrong thing. Yeah, look, I think the solution to the housing crisis is decommodifying housing. I know that sounds like a crazy anti-capitalist take. I understand that. And I myself am saying that as a house owner, okay? I do not care if the price of the house that I am inside of deflates or perishes. I do not care if there are strenuous legal hurdles that are placed upon me when I want to sell this home, or am no longer even able to sell this home for an extended period of time to continue living in this home, because I see this as shelter. That is the reason why I have this house, shelter for myself and my family. I think it's very stupid that we've designed the system initially to make sure that people could have ease of access to home ownership. And then the very same initiatives, the very same tax structure and incentives that we've created recognizing that homeownership is a pillar of safety and security, have turned into one of the best, most resilient assets that you can own. It's the one asset where if the value of it goes down, okay, it's the one asset where your expectation is the value of it will never go down, okay? Never. Unless there is a massive, massive economic crisis like the 2008 bubble. That's it. Outside of that, the expectation is it's always going to go up. It has to go up. Nobody actually treats it like a speculative asset. Because if it was actually treated like a speculative asset, then yeah, sometimes you're going to lose out on that gamble, okay? Sometimes you're going to lose out on that gamble. What do you mean? Like, can you imagine being like, excuse me, I invested into this company and then it went under. The government must save me now. Hello? That's not how this works. If you have risk associated with this gamble, because that's what it is, then yeah, sometimes you're going to lose. Are you quoting this right now? What? Okay, I'm not quoting this right now. I also believe it firmly. Yes, houses are for living in, not for speculation. Xi Jinping, president of China and general secretary of the Communist Party of China. I've been told by realtors in Vancouver that the rule in Vancouver is Vancouver prices will never go down. That's how they operate. The reason for that is because construction cannot possibly compete with demand right now. Okay, here's also another problem here. Here's also another problem with this mentality. There is some truth to it because land is finite, okay? There is not infinite land. Now, it might as well be treated as though there's infinite land with the amount of people that we have, with the density, the urban housing density that we currently have. It might as well be infinite. You could put every single person on the planet right now into the state of Texas if the Texas housing density was similar to Manhattan. So technically, there virtually is an infinite amount of land. Now, obviously, that would be, insane. Texas is ginormous. But my point is, there is already a finite amount of land, especially land where people are living or people want to live. So that's automatically baked into the system. A competent government is supposed to work against that, not consistently prop that up.
So completely incompetent when it comes to politics. They're going to have to start to fight for the policies that are good for their workers more aggressively. And I've said that to them. They need to fire their incompetent lobbyists and actually go to the people and make the arguments.
So are you saying there's a truth to the supply problem? No, the truth to the supply problem is that there is a finite amount of land. So a competent government is supposed to be working against that with construction, with opening up additional units, with finding a better way to increase the housing unit that is readily available. This is one area where I do agree with the Yimbys on. But the other problem is that they cannot do it they cannot do it in a way that like still suits the interests of profit seekers, capital owners in general. The government is supposed to compete with the private. If there is a private public partnership in the field of housing, in the sector of housing, it has to be in a way where the government is regulating the housing prices by constantly creating infinitely cheaper alternatives in the form of public housing. This is how you adjust the housing market to a more normal place. But the problem is that is considered a big no-no by virtually every liberal and every conservative. This is unacceptable. The government can't outcompete. The government must never interfere in the market competition. It's just unfair. It would never work. And it's like, no, it does. It does work. It's actually really successful in combating this crisis.
For the reforms that I'm talking about, I'm going to have to put out a call to Canadians that they have to stay politically active. They can't assume that
What about my poor landlord and her 37 and counting properties that her daddy's been building her since she was a child? I don't want her to lose out on all that money. I know. I feel bad for that person, but they're going to need to, I guess, not take a vacation to the Alps this time of the year for once. You know what I mean? They're going to have to do a little bit of belt tightening. The constant expectation that austerity can only be done to the working poor and never to the wealthy is so frustrating. The belt tightening initiatives are never expected of the capital owning class. It's always the working class that must tighten up their belts, and they do it for survival. Any sort of fiscal belt tightening for the wealthy would not even be a matter of life or death. There's never, ever an argument for austerity for the wealthy. Never. Does that not strike you as odd?
Simply by changing, by voting in an election, that everything is going to, all the problems are going to.
Anyway, Poilievre says that once conservatives take power, supporters must engage. Canada's climate-denying conservatives are explicitly making the case that generative AI's massive energy use is not only a good thing, but provides a big new market for oil and gas that they intend to exploit. I'm sorry, what? Generative AI?
We're going to need data centers for AI and blockchain and countless other things that we can.
He's just saying words. I hate these people. This is one of the worst aspects of the financialization of the global economy and what Silicon Valley has brought about to the rest of the planet. The idea that you can just like say buzzwords and people go, ooh, that's cool. I don't really fully understand it. Like, what do you mean blockchains and generative AI? What are you talking? Elaborate, please. What do you mean by that? The idea that like generative AI is going to ultimately displace the majority of the workforce. Like the generative AI is going to be doing the extraction of natural resources. So unimaginably stupid as it stands, maybe down the line, but right now, and I repeat this over and over again, and people get very mad at me for saying this because there's a lot of AI truthers in here. Okay. As it stands, generative AI can only be used in instances where it's not supposed to be correct. Okay. You can use it for the lavender targeting structure when you are trying to create new viable targets like Israel does. You can use it for claims denial, like what Brian Thompson was doing at United Healthcare before his claim was denied. Okay? You can't, as it stands, utilize AI in an instance where you need it to be correct. Okay? You need it to be 100% accurate. Or even, I guess, 99% accurate. You can use it as a way to displace certain aspects of the of certain aspects of commodity production that don't have to be correct at all. You can use it in a way where you can displace workers that engage in basically the worst aspects of capitalism. But you can't actually use AI to displace people that are building cars or, extracting natural resources in the ground. For now, they're going to Photoshop generative AI, a Doge building and a house, and the boomers will be floored. Is your assumption it's already peaked or something? No, my assumption is not that it's already peaked. Also, he also said blockchain, which is, okay, so we're just going to have a universal ledger system. Like for what? For what exactly? Unless you're just simply saying blockchain because it's a buzzword, that doesn't fit into this argument at all.
Energy for it takes tremendous amount of energy to power these data centers. Apparently, a chat GPT inquiry is 10 times more energy intensive than a Google inquiry. But but we could be powering these data centers with Canadian natural gas generators, with nuclear. We have the biggest supply of uranium. We invented the can.
It's so funny. It's so funny to me that these guys, like people who are pro-capital, are basically so invested in the value creation aspect, like the eradication of the human component, the component of labor, okay, from the production process. They're so desperate that it's the one last part of the equation that they simply cannot make more efficient because, the most efficient form of it is just simply slavery. And because they can't do that, they're just desperately relying on technological improvements in this area, no matter how inefficient and how costly it is. Like every aspect of the service sector, or even every aspect of commodity production that has been streamlined and made more efficient through automation has, in certain instances, not all, in certain instances, made the concept more shitty. I don't know how else to put it. Look no further than, not automation necessarily, but like self-checkouts as an example. It's cheaper for grocery chains to create self-checkout places where like one cashier can oversee, 10 cash registers at the same time and barely do a job at that, rather than hiring 10 cashiers. In that process, however, it's cheaper for them overall, even if it leads to more theft. What happens when you erase labor in its entirety? What happens? What are you going to do with all these people? Like, this doesn't make any sense.
We have the incredible nuclear physicists and engineers. 60% of Ontario's energy already comes from nuclear. So we could be powering these facilities, and they're just beasts that are going to gobble up electricity.
Yeah, the tech companies are absolutely desperate for it.
We're going to need data centers for AI and blockchain and countless other things.
Ugh. Finally, Pierre Poilievre thanks Jordan Peterson for standing up for free speech. A concept that is just ultimately American.
All Canadians want to thank you for your immense courage and the personal political and non-political.
Yeah, he took such a big price on that, dude. It was crazy. It's so crazy.
Price that you have paid for standing up for your convictions and defending freedom of speech, because I know you have paid a very big price for that, but you have never bent, you have never backed down, you've had a spine of steel, and there are countless other people who will have the freedom to express themselves because you paid the price for them. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Because of Jordan Peterson, people are not going to prison for misgendering trans people because of wokeism. Except at the same time, Justin Trudeau has made wokeism the law of the land, and he has jailed every every transphobe.
It's been a privilege.
Yeah, it's been such a difficult journey for Jordan. So yeah, look alive, Canada. That's your next leader.